Jesus disappointed people. Jesus walked away from demands. He rested. He didn't say yes to everything. Hello, my wonderful listeners. Welcome back to Luxora, your journey through struggles into light. I'm your host, Ibubichku, and today marks the beginning of something personal, something real, and something deep. We begin a series on learning to say no without guilt. And to start this series, we'll be starting with this episode, Why No Feels Like Guilt. If I'm being honest, this episode almost didn't happen. Not because I don't have the right words, but because I've spent most parts of my life afraid of what happens after I say no. Maybe you can relate with me. Perhaps the word no sits heavy in your chest. Maybe it sounds rude, like disrespect, like rebellion, sounds unloving, ungrateful, almost sinful. Like you're letting someone down, maybe even God, but you don't know where that feeling comes from. But you just know that it's right there. Today, we're not learning how to say no yet. We need to understand why it feels so wrong. No didn't start as a personal decision for so many of us. It began as a risk in our homes, in our cultures, and even in faith spaces. No was associated with disrespect, disobedience, rebellion, pride, and ingratitude. So early in life, we learned that agreement was safer than honesty. So growing up, I was known as a good child, the one who didn't give trouble, the one always compliant. Even when something didn't sit right with me, I easily agreed with it. Not because I didn't have a voice, but because I learned that being agreeable kept the peace. Saying no felt like talking back, so I said yes and called it respect. And over time, survival slowly became a personality. When you're praised of compliance long enough, you start confusing it with character. You become the dependable one, the helper, the compliant one, and the mature one. But beneath that image is fear. The fear of being rejected, fear of being misunderstood, or fear of being replaced. And you know what? The danger of this is very subtle. You stop checking in with yourself because your needs gradually become background noise to you. For many of us, this conditioning followed us into our faith. We heard scriptures like dying to self, serving sacrificially, loving like Jesus, but we weren't taught discernment. So sacrifice turned into suffering, service turned into silence, and love turned into self-erasure. There was a time I didn't even ask myself if I had the capacity to serve. I just showed up. If a need was announced, I felt like saying no meant I was not spiritual enough. I didn't want to look unserious, and I didn't want anyone questioning my commitment to God. So I kept saying yes, even when I was exhausted, even when my joy was gone.
People call it dedication, but now I recognize it as burnout wearing spiritual label. We were taught to give, but not when to stop. And when exhaustion begins to set in, we start blaming ourselves. If I were more spiritual, this wouldn't feel heavy. If I loved better, this wouldn't hurt. If I trusted God more, I wouldn't need boundaries. But that's not faith, that's guilt wearing scriptures.
Here's the hard truth so many of us need to hear. People pleasing is not love. I remember moments when I already knew the answer was no, but yet I said yes because I didn't want to see disappointment on someone's face. I didn't want to explain myself. I didn't want to feel like I had failed anyone. So I agreed, yet I went home heavy. Not angry with them, but angry at myself. People pleasing is not kindness. It is simply fear. Fear of disappointing people, fear of being misunderstood, fear of causing conflict, fear of losing acceptance. So you say yes, even when your soul is saying no, your body is tired, your spirit is uneasy, and the hardest part, people reward it. They call you selfless, they call you godly, they call you mature, but inside, something is gradually shrinking. The hardest part wasn't even saying yes too much. It was what happened when I tried to say no. When you've been conditioned long enough, no begins to sound like disrespect, pride, lack of love, and even weak faith. So even when you finally say no to something you know you cannot carry, guilt shows up. I remember saying no to something I had prayed about and had peace, but you know what? Afterwards, guilt sets in, and I began to question myself. Was I selfish? Did I miss out on something that God was trying to say to me? Was I becoming lazy? But you know what? God was not accusing me. My conditioning was. That guilt wasn't conviction. It was simply my nervous system panicking because an old survival pattern had been broken. Today you're breaking that old agreement that says, I am only safe when I am needed. What makes this pattern even harder to break is the praises that come with it. Even the society rewards it. People say things like, you're so strong, you never complain, you're always there, but nobody asks if you are okay. And over time, you learn to perform strength while you're slowly shrinking inside. You realized you were celebrated for endurance, not honesty, simply because honesty feels like failure, not wholeness, just endurance. Now, this is where we need a clearer picture of Jesus. He was very compassionate, but he was not endlessly accessible. Luke 5:16, but Jesus often withdrew to lonely places and prayed. Jesus disappointed people. Jesus walked away from demands. He rested. He didn't say yes to everything. He said yes to the Father. If boundaries, rest, and walking away were holy for Jesus, if Jesus needed space to feel aligned, why do these things feel unholy to us? Now, why do we think holiness equates exhaustion? What if your no isn't rebellion? What if it's wisdom forming? What if guilt isn't proof that you've done something wrong, but an evidence that you are unlearning survival? What if guilt is simply the sound of old survival patterns breaking? I am learning that guilt wasn't from God. It was only an old agreement with fear, and God is gently rewriting that story. Now, before we end, quietly sit with this. Who did you have to become to survive a world that didn't honor your no? And who is God inviting you to become now? Finally, I would love you to declare this with me. My no is not a sin. It is my voice returning, and God is not threatened by my honesty. So in the next episode, we'll be talking about a dangerous myth that good people don't have boundaries. But until then, be gentle with yourself, keep on learning, and keep relearning. Unlearning takes time, however, stay true to yourself. And this is Luxora, your journey through struggles into light. Do well to follow us on our social media platforms at Luxora Officials on Instagram, TikTok, and on Facebook. Also do well to like, share, and then click on the notification button just so you get informed when new episodes drop. I still remain your host, Ebube Chukwu.